Hello folks, I haven't got a lot of time today because I've got to get to the gym and sort my life out today because marking's gone on all day and it's doing my head in, but there we go. This first Dobby Nightmare is from Ralph, and I think it'll be the only one today because it's quite long. That's what she said. Hi North, it is I, Ralph. Ex-Yu-Gi-Oh player and not so daring escaper of school invading chavs once again. I remember that Hobby Nightmare. I remember that one. Yeah, when you were in school and you were chased around by a load of chavs, who are very low-class people in the UK, for those of you in America. And they smashed something up in the school, didn't they, when they were chasing you, and you got done for it. Oh dear, I remember that one. Very vivid. I'm glad you enjoyed the recounting of my previous tale from days gone by. So I thought I'd send in another. That's how it works, I'm afraid. You praise my writing, I spam you with more. And this has ended up being quite a long one. That's what she said. As you can see from the email title, this is not a 40k nightmare. It revolves around a game of Smash Brothers, of all things. Dude, when I worked in a bar in London, right, they did Smash Brothers tournaments, and the state of people that it brought in. My lord. I have consciously chosen to send this in, though, as I believe it ties in with your channel mission of self-improvement as a person and as a man, nerdy or otherwise. I'm sure if this makes it the Friday night cut and gets read out, that you'll unpack this and give your takes as ever. Indeed, I'd be fascinated in hearing your reactions and asides to what transpires here. So from here, I'll simply write it out as it happened. Okay, cool. The year was early 2015, and as you know, guys, Friday is the day where we veer away from 40k and Warhammer a little bit. If I do get one that is not Warhammer related, or is more role-playing related, or even life related, it will be on a Friday for the Friday Feel section, which is why we're here now. So, the year was early 2015. My buddies and I were in our mid to late 20s. So being in our mid 20s and equipped with degrees, most of us were, of course, working minimum wages in retail, bars and call centres. Yep. Were we high flyers? Not yet. More doors have opened in our 30s though. There's a lot of truth to that stereotype. Dude, it is the truth though. You'll get your degree, you struggle through your 20s, and then when you get into your 30s, that's when you start to figure out how to actually use it. At least as a man. Were we happy? Hell yeah! In my previous Yu-Gi-Oh account, I was keen to emphasise the truth that my friend and I were quiet and timid teenage nerds. But both me and my friends really developed and grew as people in university, and in hindsight, we were stood at a crossroads at the age of 18. One road led to the worst case of neckbeardism in its various, often dangerous forms. The other led to not taking yourself too seriously, going to the rock society, going out for a few drinks, actually giving the gym and the badminton club a go, toning down the emo clothing and alternative accessories a wee bit, dropping the secondary school labels, and stopping behaviours such as othering the people that don't like the same nerdy things you like. You know, just being a normal, if still geeky, university student who gets reasonably drunk on a weekend, maybe gets lucky with the partner of their choice, and has a laugh with their friends. The usual. I would like to think that my friends and I chose the right path, and university was great. So great, in fact, that in our 20s it took us some time to escape the gravitational pull of university culture. Dude, I've been there. As a phenomenon, I'm sure it isn't too uncommon, especially for nerds who found their safe space in the higher academic bubble, or for people that stayed in the university town afterwards. We fitted both categories in this. I wouldn't exactly recommend this lifestyle for people who want to start a career in their 20s, but you know what? No regrets here. Our early to late 20s could accurately be described as a hangover, sometimes a literal hangover, of those halcyon uni years. We stayed in the same city, we lived in the same terrible rental house shares that are marketed to students, and we ate rubbish food. We hung out with, met and dated and generally mingled with the circles of people who were still studying for their degrees. When we clocked out of the entry-level grind, we led a life of generally chilling out, gym sessions, metal music, Skyrim, Game of Thrones marathons, movie nights, knocking around in my friend's car to go on hikes on a few local hills, and footpaths. That was our downtime, and it was all good stuff at the time of our lives. Dude, that sounds like a really cool life you got living there. Of course, one of these carefree activities was going to the same nightclub we'd always frequented on a Friday and Saturday night. It was, honestly, a superb rock club. It was filled to the brim with metalheads, nerds, and weirdos, and I mean this with the utmost of affection. Most of us would have been turned away by the bouncers in a regular club on the dress code alone, and I loved it for that. There were a few characters, to say the least. You'd get people with canes and trench coats, older guys with Motorhead shirts and denim jackets smothered in patches. There was a guy who was there every time. He always found a relatively quiet table and drew these amazing M.C. Escher-style artworks with a load of pens and a pad of sketching paper. There was a guy who brought one of those big chrome balls you sometimes see street performers using, rolling it smoothly over his shoulders and arms, just as a thing to do at the bar. People were regularly dressed up as Beetlejuice, Alex from A Clockwork Orange, or had the black metal of Kiss face paint slathered all over their faces. And this wasn't for Halloween, this was just for the fun of it on a regular night. Most people there were just normal students, of course, but if you had a prop, a top hat, a costume, or just an alternative looking person, this was the place where you'd go on your night out. Okay. My friends and I were on the normie end of the bell curve, at least to look at us, but it was our place and we were regulars there. Okay. We had a routine down to where we would get rather merry at home on the cheap before trying to seem as sober as possible for the bouncer when at the entrance to this club. We would get tanked up at one of our places, listen to stuff like Megadeth, and Encephalum, Lamb of God, Tertius, Metallica, and the like while playing Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, or taking turns drunk gaming on games like Call of Duty. All of the above was great, and I'm sure the nostalgia I have towards that period of my life is coming across in spades in my writing. It is, man. I've lived these memories. I think there'll be a lot of dudes listening to this who have lived those memories. Yeah. Anyway, enough preamble. I've set out the board. On to the content. What transpired was this. On one of these nights out, we met a guy with a Zelda t-shirt on. He was akin to my friend and I, in that he was a nerd but looked like your normal average guy in his 20s. I remember chatting to Zelda Shirt about video games, 40k, sci-fi films and the usual sort of thing, and by the end of the night, my friend and I were duly invited to go over to a small house party on the next Friday before going out next week. Of course, I said this sounds good, because it did. He went out of his way to say that he had a couple of friends that he knew we'd get along with. They liked metal, check. They liked their Smash Bros, check. Their sci-fi, their anime, and their video games. So yeah, a mini house party. A different place for the pre-drinks, a couple of guys who on paper were the sort of people we would vibe with. Great. What could go wrong? Unfortunately, as the football adage goes, matches aren't won on paper. Yeah, I remember that there was a really good quote by Brian Clough, who was a football coach back in the day, for those of you who don't know. And he said, you know, on paper I've got a really very good team, but unfortunately, the game's played on grass. It just always makes me chuckle. Things after he lost like a really big game, like, you know, like really heavily. Alright. Neither, unfortunately, are friendships. My close friend, an all-round bro and regular gaming buddy, I'll call him Paul for the rest of this nightmare, and another friend who Paul was dating, I'll call her Emily, and I planned to go along. So, the Friday came, and we went to the house party. Bit of advice, lads. If you're going to a new party of people you don't know, don't bring your girlfriend. Don't bring a woman in general. You don't know what people there are like, and you could end up in a fight very, very, very easily. If your girl gets touched or the wrong thing said to them because the guys there are pretty weird, you don't know them yet. You don't know them yet. Always test out the waters first. Go on your own with some of your guy buddies. Don't go with anybody who can be screwed with. Do you know what I mean? Go on your own with your buddies, preferably the large ones, and go and check it out first. I pretty much know what's going to happen here, but let's see if I'm right. Let's see if I'm right. So the Friday came and we went to the house party. We walked in and it was the usual. Anyone who has been a student to a house party in the UK knows what I mean. A rough round the hedges, Victorian terraced house share, just like our place. There was a lounge with a commercial rock of the Guns N' Roses and Bon Jovi ilk playing from iTunes on somebody's laptop, a garble of chatting voices, battered furniture, Rizzlers and lighters on the coffee table, enough empty bottles leaning up against the sofa and atop the windowsill. The usual student gathering. The air was scented in the sickly sweet aroma of beer, melding with fizzy drinks and vodka cocktails. We brought some drink to be good guests, as you do. We milled about for a bit, and the people there seemed alright. There were a couple of familiar faces from the rock club that we had seen before but never really talked to in depth, so all good so far. Then we asked Zelda Shirt about the guys he had mentioned last week. Oh yeah, they're in the back, he says. It turns out the Wii U was set up on a TV in the other downstairs bedroom. This was a 2 up, 2 down terrace place. Okay. Cool. Once we got that info, we headed over there to say hi. We walked in. It could only be described as a dark grotto. The big light wasn't on, just a manky lamp in the corner of the closed curtains of the window. I could smell a rather unpleasant damp smell from the moment I stood on the floor. The mouldy smell melded with the saccharine sweetness of vodka Red Bull and the odour of Chinese takeaway. And there they were, our guys. Sat there, the two of them playing Smash Bros on a raggedy sofa and armchair. Loud, very extreme as it gets, metal blasted from the speakers instead of the sounds of the game. As for their names, we'll go with Bill and Ben for the funsies. Ben was actually a rather handsome chap. The person a certain type of geek girl would find appealing in terms of his looks and aesthetic. I know one geek girl who would, yeah. Name's Sarah and she writes into the show quite a lot. Sorry, Sarah, sorry. He was very folk metal, almost painfully so. What are his arms like, actually? I don't know if she'd be into him. What are his arms like? Anyway. Almost painfully so, with leather braces on his arms, silver rings, a Thor's hammer necklace, a couple of Mestival fusic... What am I doing? Mestival fusic? What am I doing? Music festival wristbands, and a Fin Troll t-shirt. He was skinny, but normal height, with extremely long, as in he could sit on it, dyed black hair. Okay, maybe not. He had a pinched, pale skin and slim look and jawline, with a younger-than-his-years face, a bit like Tom Felton in the later Harry Potter films. As I say, someone that a certain type of girl would gravitate towards. Okay. Bill sat in the armchair, was almost the complete opposite. He was the very stereotype of an overweight metalhead, and it wasn't the best look for his frame, frankly. His hair was receding, and his forehead was plastered in sweat just from sitting there. He had an unreadable death metal logo shirt, and he too had the pallid skin of a person who rarely caught the sun, and frizzy wavy hair. He was, unironically, wearing those really large boots which had a flame pattern on them. If you've been to a particular metal or rock nightclub, you know the ones I'm talking about. We hovered over for a few seconds before asking if we could play too. Their heads turned, and I swear the two lads looked as if we'd just landed from Mars. There's a hobby nightmare I listened to recently where the narrator described walking into a geek space, saying that the eyes of the regulars were like those lows of a trout who had just been caught doing something lewd in a B&Q. What are you talking about? You may not remember reading it, but it's fresh in my mind. And this is the perfect example of that expression. They looked at us three, myself, Paul and Emily, almost shocked, like we had just walked in and shat on their table. It was an immediate, awkward atmosphere. At this point, I will say this for them, and this will be something I'm sure you will discuss if you read this out. These two lads were drunk. Well, yeah. I take the attitude that drunkenness can be a legitimate cause for bad behaviour. But at the same time, this is not an excuse for bad behaviour. I would not have submitted this as a nightmare if I believed that the drunkenness gives somebody a pass. Ultimately, we were tipsy too. We had met lots of drunk people and seen lots of antics in our 20s, so there's still a standard by which to measure people's conduct against. Your take may be different from mine here north. I can almost hear the authoritative sip of Yorkshire tea and interjection here, but I don't see the fact that these guys were on vodka and Red Bulls as an excuse for acting in the way they're about to, and a first impression is always, unfortunately, a first impression. But yes, for the sake of this being a transparent, balanced account, these two were getting tanked up. Yeah, no, I get what you mean, man. I get what you mean. Yeah, I'm with you to a certain extent. I'm not going to interject here. They shrugged and grunted in an affirmative, and they finished up their game. As we sat down, Ben made a whole show of dropping off the sofa and dropping down onto the floor, crossing his legs like a kid who is on a gaming rug. They played one more round, saying we could jump in next. We took the sofa, and I could see within a few seconds of watching that this was some less adept way than... Sorry. I could see within seconds of watching that this was some less adept play than ours was as a group. Okay. After their game, Ben was the one who put the controllers in our hands. He gave me the controller and wanted me to play against Bill. Good stuff. He also said that they were the sort of players who played without the items turned on and wanted to do a 1v1 games rather than the manic Smash Bro games with 4 people at once. Paul and I were almost relieved by this, as this was how we played as well. So, cool, right? We're all on the same page. On the character selection screen, I selected the character Ness, and Bill immediately said, "Oh, try hard," in a joking, not joking kind of way. Ness wasn't particularly powerful, so I'm not sure where he was coming from here. It was just a character that I liked. I looked towards these two and immediately felt the urge to push back and dispute Ness's place on the tier list. He was lower than halfway down, but I resisted the urge. He, of course, chose Bayonetta. She was considered a very overpowered character in this version of the game, and objectively right at the top of the tier list. He made a comment that if I had chosen a powerful character, then he would too. My game against Bill was very one-sided. With Ness, I won resolutely. Bill was taking it okay. It seemed like a normal game, honestly. But Ben had swung around on the rug, and he was talking to Paul about heavy metal the whole time. Ben was jabbering in a rapid and loud voice, trying to shout over one of the few bands I'd recognised, Flesh God Apocalypse, that was blasting out of the speakers. It was at this point of being a distraction, and I was overhearing snippets of a diatribe about, quote, real metal, quote unquote. If you're not aware of metal elitism, this was some of that, spotted out in the wild, as it were. Where some metalheads seem to think they're ahead of the curve by listening to bands almost nobody's ever heard of, while shitting on those who like stuff like Slayer or Metallica, I'd seen this behaviour before, and it seemed like Ben, at least, was one of those. Dude, I've come across this a few times. There is a dude who goes to like a local rock club. Well, it's not really a rock club. It was a rock metal night, right? And nowadays in Liverpool, we've actually got a rock club, which is pretty cool. So I'm quite happy with that. But I used to go to this one place because nobody had any choice but to go to this one event, right? And it was at a normally non-metal place, underground. So we walk in there, and he's always there, and he's always taking over. He wears, like, you know, long pants. He's got long hair, a short beard. Looks like he's looking down on you all the time. He's got lots of, like, metal rings. You know what I mean? Like you know, silver rings, and a big chain. And he always, like, takes over the dance floor because he wants everybody looking at him. Do you know what I mean? He's like, oh yeah, watch me. I'm gonna headbang now. I'm gonna, like, boogie around, do my own thing. And as soon as anything comes on that everybody likes, like, if you've had a few drinks and, like, Limp Bizkit comes on, everyone's on a dance floor, right? I know it sounds weird, but it is true. Or Linkin Park, or anything else that you'd be like, oh, cringe, right? You're on there. You're having a good time. You know, you're just having a good time. Like, he will, like, literally see his arse and go, oh, sucks. This sucks so much. And will, like, stand at the side, glowering at everybody who dares to dance to this stuff. He'll then go over and go to the the DJ and put something on, like, from a band nobody's heard of, from Sweden or something, and we'll come back and go, have you heard of this band? Yeah, I didn't think you had, you know. They're really good, though. I was like, dude, shut up. Like, we were all dancing to Disturbed, having a good time. Alright? These are songs that we know from when we were, like, 16. We're drunk, we're having a good time, leave us alone. Like, why do you always... Dudes like that are the bane of metal. They really are. They're the bane of it. Can't stand them. And this is one of those guys, I think. Anyway. Me and Bill went on for another round, and I chose a character called Robin for fun. Not a particularly good character, and one I'm not that great with. This might sound big-headed, but I was actually holding off a bit, and still won. This was when Bill came out with the first grumbles that I was, quote-unquote, just spamming. The atmosphere was souring and creaking under drunken awkwardness and fast. Ben hadn't even watched the game, as he was so engrossed in talking with Paul in a rapid northeastern accent. I could hear ramblings about how real metal, supposedly the brutal death metal we were currently listening to, is like modern-day classical music, and that whatever band Paul had heard of and liked didn't have artistic merit, quote-unquote, or something along those lines. When I went 3-0 over Bill, after choosing a random character for the third game, he sat back in a casual manner and put his controller aside, pointedly drinking from his drink and clearly not wanting another round with me. It was then that Ben, unaware of the results of our games, started loudly challenging Paul to a game. He did this in an obnoxious way, scooting along the floor and doing this thing where he'd be nudging his shoulder and elbow into Paul's knees and going, "I'll destroy you, and all that." I remember thinking at the time, I'd probably be best to just duck out right now, as, understatement, we just weren't vibing with these guys at all. Astute Emily had long since left the room. Paul hadn't had a game yet though, and he persevered. Okay, he was not quite as good as me at this game, and his round against Ben was actually close. I think Ben used Roy or Ike, I can't quite remember. And Paul was pretty good with Yoshi. Ben slammed his controller down when he lost and looked pissed off after their first game. Paul and myself exchanged glances at this point, and Ben, rather aggressively, started demanding that they play a game. He also demanded that Paul uses a less cheap character, quote-unquote. They did, and Paul made a point of choosing a character right near the bottom of the tier list, Kirby, and won again. Ben threw a middle finger up at the screen, literally flipping off Kirby's victory screen when he lost. Again, the word try hard entered the conversation. We got a dose of, and I quote, "I bet you put so many hours into this," unquote, from them, suggesting we didn't have a life and instead just played this game all the time. That old chestnut. We were making the move to stand up, pick up our drinks, and leave these two to it, when Emily walked back into the room and sat on Paul's sofa arm next to him. She affectionately, here we go, what did I say was going to happen? She affectionately leant into his shoulder, saw that the game was on the character select screen, and was all smiley and jovial, blissfully unaware that the atmosphere of this room, beneath the relentless extreme metal, had sunk like a stone. Ben immediately thrust the controller into her hand, shouting and half demanding, "Do you want to play me?" Taken aback, Emily was like, okay. I could see by his body language and overall vibe that Ben thought he was going to get an easy win here against this trendy looking girl dressed up for a night out. Like us, you'd never know Emily was into games and geek stuff just to look at her. You could see the cogs in his tipsy mind working, and that he thought this was going to be a slam dunk and a way to get some glory back. I can hear you now, North, saying, "Just leave the room." Yeah, no, I'm kind of thinking that, but the way this is all turned around, you can't really do much, you know what I mean? Yeah, I know, but we were drunk, and an unsordid curiosity was taking over at this point. Ben immediately seemed a lot more chipper as he selected a sword character again. Again, I think it might have been Ike. I remember that she selected Jigglypuff. All these stupid ass names, man. This character is a rock bottom of the tier list in the game, and Bill actually laughed at her choice from the armchair and did a terrible impression of Jigglypuff's song from the Pokemon anime as it was loading up. It was a few seconds into the game that Ben's leg was jiggling nervously. His face was turned towards the screen, so I couldn't see his expression, but I could see that Emily had spooked him with how she was playing. She racked up a lot of damage on the first stock, and then when I watched, she hit a perfect rest on Ben. As part of me did not want her to land it, as I knew this guy's reaction was not going to be good. Oh no. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Okay. Rest, for those who haven't played Smash, is a move where you need to align the centre of your character over the centre of theirs. It is an extremely powerful but easy to punish move that needs precise timing. It's one of those moves where being hit by it can certainly result in annoyance if you're that way inclined, and if it's one of those moves that's seen as quite a flashy and hype play. Right, she's schooling on him basically, okay. The rest took his first stock life away in an instant. Paul and I unconsciously did an appreciative ooh noise. That was not to annoy the other guys or anything like that, it was just the sort of thing we did in that game. Just a natural reaction to a hype and cool moment happening on the screen. Ben thought differently. Apparently, this was his limit. The game was still happening, he didn't even pause it. The guy turned around, utter rage on his face. Ooh, 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 I'll give you, ooh. He genuinely yelled this at us at the top of his lungs, and flung his controller onto the ground. The wire of the cube controller almost getting caught in his leather bracer things for a moment. Emily stopped playing as we all just looked at him. He got up, walked over to the Wii U, and began to furiously fumble with the button on the front for a second, before ripping the wires out of the back. Ooh, he said. He mockingly shouted at us as the screen went black, replaced by the TV source icon. As this happened, Bill, instead of finding this weird, laughed at his friend's antics. Paul, Emily, and myself just looked at each other, and then these two guys in disbelief. Ben sat back down, looking at the screen. Bill did a strange tipsy smile and leaned down over his armchair. Conspiratorially, he made a show of winking and said that Ben respects the hustle really, making it clear that he believed that the three of us had sharked or smurfed on them, or been somehow dishonest with them regarding our skill level. Then, he was tipsily trying to fist bump us, especially Emily. All the while the console was now off, as Ben was sat on the floor, cross-legged, his gangly arms with their leather braces were resting against his knees. He tipped his head back. Oh my god. He tipped his head back and did a primal "Rah!" That could have either been him going along with the death metal vocals or a noise of abject frustration. A bit of both, I reckon. Then he pounded his fist against his knee, headbanging with a flourish of his super long hair. Ben clutched his drink, holding it upward like a Viking's tankard before sipping on it, and he stared at the now dark TV screen as if in an aloof badass way. As if he wasn't a 25-year-old dude who had just thrown a tantrum and a rage quit a game in real life because he was bested by a Jigglypuff rested by a girl. Emily and I exchanged glances. She put her controller down, then she fired Paul. Sorry, she fired Paul? What? She then fired Paul and then me. I call the, this is weird help eyes that women are so good at shooting towards us guys. I'm sure you know the look I'm talking about, that I'm freaked out wide-eyed stare. And indeed, it felt like it was time to go all in and see what was going on in the other room and leave these two to do their thing. We got up, started walking out, and before we'd even left the room, Ben was already plugging the cables back into the Wii U, and Bill was picking up the controller again. They were completely shameless, almost reveling in the fact that we had given up as a result of their behaviour, and that they were happy to play the game again now that they didn't have to play against us anymore. Wow. Wow. I'm suspecting mental illness here, at least from one of them. That's not an excuse, but, like, you know, I'm just going to say it. And one of them, I suspect it was Ben, from the accent I'd heard when he was giving Paul his stream of consciousness metal elitism rant, then said something which I may have misheard, even in that moment. But it sounded an awful lot like, even the fucking bitch was a tryhard. Wow. The word bitch was in there. I'm sorry to say, I also heard the F word used, assumingly to describe me or Paul. The F word meaning the bad homophobic one. Oof. I was also rather relieved Paul didn't hear this stuff. Sometimes it's better to avoid drama or confrontation. This was one of those moments. We left the room and left them to it. The awkwardness only continued though. We were back in the lounge, and Zelda T-shirt came up to us maybe 15 minutes later, asking if we had played Smash Bros or Mario Kart with his friends in the other room, and Paul fessed up. So often understated, Paul just said the words along the line of, yeah, but they didn't seem too happy when we beat them, so we just left. We had a couple more drinks and just hung out there as a three in the lounge in the kitchen, not really vibing with it, truth be told. When Zelda T-shirt came back to Paul and I a while later, he had this strange smile on his face. He said to us that Bill and Ben had told him that they didn't really think much of us, quote unquote. Paul and I were like, okay then, why? Visibly confused. Then Zelda T-shirt said that he had been told by Bill and Ben themselves that they had absolutely annihilated us in the game, that we were terrible at the game, total noobs in their words, and that we got all salty and slunk off in humiliation at our losses. Okay, yeah, we're now beyond the point of mental illness. This is just douchebaggery of the highest order. For the second time that evening, Paul and I looked at each other in a, wait, what? Moment of disbelief. We told Zelda Shirt that they were turning what had actually happened on its head. More than anything, however, I was genuinely flabbergasted that people in their mid-20s could actually act like this over a cartoon fighting game. I don't know if Zelda Shirt bought what was being said. The idea of saying we'd happily rematch them to an audience of people crossed my mind, I won't lie, but I didn't really care at this point, so just made like Elsa and let it go. If that's the narrative these two wanted, they can have it. As soon as it was getting towards the time the rock club opened, we just excused ourselves and headed out to have our night out. This was way earlier than we would have left our own place, and it had been awkward as hell seeing the two metalheads cutting through the lounge to go to the toilet every so often, conveniently staring intently at the ceiling or floor when going near us. Emily left with us two, and on the walk to the venue, we told her what Zelda Shirt had said to us. She laughed it off, and quote, "He really didn't like the rest, did he?" Unquote. It caused some obvious in-jokes between our group. When playing Smash Bros, there was inevitably a few weeks of us joking that the loser who had actually won, or if I lose this, I'll have to unplug the console, has been repeated as recently as lockdown in inopportune moments. It was funny at the time, but looking back, I think it's just rather tragic that nerds like this are out there. A little epilogue though before I finish up. It'd be great to say that we just caught these guys on a bad day, or a stupid drunken day. I'd love to end this by saying they were actually chill lads really, that we were just chalk and cheese, and all was reconciliatory with handshakes when we met them another time, but unfortunately, a few months later, we heard from the rumour mill that Bill and Ben were a pair that the rock club owners had their eyes on for a while for previous unknown antics, and that they had finally been permanently banned from the club after the Smash Bros evening. Apparently, they went out on a night where we weren't there, got absolutely plastered, and were banned for asking for multiple tap waters at the bar before taking the water upstairs and tipping it all over the railings on a first floor balcony that overlooks the dance floor. The cretins had literally soaked the people dancing below in the stuff, and had been dragged out by their collars by the bouncers. All I can remember thinking was hearing this. Sorry, all I can remember thinking when hearing this was, well, arseholes are gonna be arseholes. So there you go. I will quickly finish here by saying that I still love a bit of metal and the community. I'm still as geeky as ever in my mid-30s. I know you're in that category too, North. This was a one-off like many of these nightmares, and is not at all reflective of my other experiences within these spaces, drunk or not. I've met plenty of gruff bikers, aging metalheads who speak eloquently in philosophy or Lord of the Rings lore, things like that. I've seen nerds drawing beautiful digital artwork and writing poetry. I've seen other guys in death metal t-shirts who are the nicest blokes imaginable. Hell, I've got an acquaintance who is a furry who is a perfectly nice chap. I don't even have a 40k nightmare, simply because everybody I've met in that space has always been polite, patient, and fantastic. In short, this is a massive outlier, and is my last email to you, unless something horrible happens in the future, hot off the press. It did happen, however, and sometimes we need to remember that there are a few bad apples out there sharing our spaces. All the best, North, and keep on being awesome to any of the massive majority of fantastic nerds that have listened to this. Have a good one, Ralph. Cheers, mate. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. And you're right. You know, they are the exception to the rule rather than the rule, so I agree with you on that one. All right? I love you all long time. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'll speak to you very, very soon. See you on Sunday for some more lore. Bye now.